Hello, freedom fighters! Welcome to another episode of the Angry Albertan Podcast with special guest David Dickson, former police officer, protester extraordinaire, somewhat of a legal beagle, not a lawyer. None of this, what we're about to talk about tonight, is to be considered legal advice. For genuine legal advice, you should always consult your lawyer. And David is not a lawyer, and neither are I, but we're going to discuss a bunch of legal topics tonight. Wow, we saw some shenanigans with the Whistle Stop Cafe's court appearance today. We were supposed to see him in court on a Zoom call between 10 and 12, and a bunch of protesters outside of the Red Deer Courthouse, a bunch of protesters out at the Whistle Stop Cafe, all in support of Chris, the owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe. And they just, we're just going to delay that till the end of the day. And we're going to do it at 4 o'clock. Well, the verdict came out well before 4 o'clock. I don't even think Chris was invited. Although I don't know if it would have made much of a difference anyway. Welcome to the show, David. Could you tell us what's happening in layman's terms with the Whistle Stop Cafe? We understand he had a couple of Alberta Health Services closure orders to deal with. And those were essentially ignored, and he remained open. And so AHS went to court and got this court order to have the court order him to close. What are the ramifications of this, David?
So probably the simplest way to look at this is if you get a speeding ticket and you ignore it, and then the court finds you guilty and you ignore it, then a warrant gets issued for your arrest 2 years down the road, and suddenly you get pulled over and go, what just happened? Basically, if you ignore, and it's no fault of Chris's, it's no fault of anybody's right now. We're in very strange times, because typically these closure orders are issued to businesses that, have got cockroaches walking around on the floor, and they know exactly why they've been closed. They know what they've got to do. And so normally you respond by actually either doing a work order or just walking away from the business. In this situation with these new rules, these work orders come to you and you don't know what to do with them. Businesses can't afford to close. So they just stay open. They effectively ignore that court date, and hoping that somebody will come back and they'll either shout at them, and there'll be lots of shouting backwards and forwards. Alberta Health will only do that so long before they say, okay, well, what we've now got is we've got proof that you're not just not following the Alberta Health orders, you're actually ignoring what we're doing. Because there is an actual process, like when you get a speeding ticket, there's a process where you can plead not guilty. And then you can go in front of someone and say, here's why I'm not guilty. I want to argue my case. Well, all these Alberta Health orders have that process. It's a little bit different than going to court. You've got 10 days to actually respond to it. And we can throw in the comments at the bottom a bit later some of those links as to where you go. But if you get one of these, and the only two that are really relevant to the Provincial Health Act are either a work order or a closure order. So if you're currently a business that is not allowed to open full stop, or can only open in a certain way, like restaurants are allowed to open if they do takeout, but they can't be open for dine-in. Gyms can't be open at all. So if you're doing something that meets the parameters of 42/2020, that says you must be closed, or you can't open for this type, and you do that, Alberta Health just comes and gives you immediately a closure order. At that point, you should appeal it. If you're in another type of business where, say, they've told you that your staff, that you're not cleaning the terminal often enough, or you're not, chairs are too close together or whatever, but you are a business that's allowed to be open, you're just not following the rules 100% as far as the numpty from Alberta Health who actually turned up, who probably hasn't read the rules himself either or herself. And they'll give you a ticket saying this is a work order. So this is basically now a list of instructions of things you have to do for the next time they come back. They don't have anything quite the same over here, but in England we used to have a thing where you could actually get a ticket where there was something wrong with your car, and rather than getting a fine, you got a ticket to, within 7 days, go and get it fixed, come back and show the police that you've got it fixed, and then you're good to go. Similar sort of thing here. It's like a remedial order of, if you don't fix these things when we come back, then we'll issue a closure order. So you've got these two stages. Both of those can be appealed. The nice thing about if you get a work order is you can usually find that AHS is applying these orders in an unfair way to you as a small business. For example, like Karen down in Leduc in the coffee shop, she was told she had to wipe the terminal, every between every customer. That was the rules, and if you didn't do that, you would get a closure order. You would be shut down. But then on Costco's website, it says we clean the high traffic area where we have, the tills, where we have thousands of people coming through and using the same till over and over again. We clean them every 4 hours as a matter of process. It's like, okay, well, that doesn't meet AHS's guidelines or Alberta Health's guidelines. So why aren't they being closed down? So in your appeal, you've got grounds for that appeal. Same with a closure order. If they issue a closure order, you can appeal the same as you could to a court and say, well, yeah, I know you've made this rudimentary decision, but what was that based on? I mean, at the end of the day, the Health Act and these specifically closure orders for businesses like restaurants, they're designed for the safety of the customers. So, if you've got rats running around, obviously somebody's going to get food poisoning, or if you haven't got any hot water in the business, then that could become an issue for sanitization. But they're all, proven situations. In the current situation, nobody has ever got to court yet to prove, and the government has never provided any evidence whatsoever to suggest that the reasons for closing businesses down is a safety thing. I mean, at the end of the day, like we know in care homes, if they think it's all about safety and saving lives, particularly as like Kenny today, talked about the poor people in care homes who were, and in this province, since this started, the average age of somebody dying is 82 years of age, and most of them have been in care homes. And but we did something to sort that out. We paid the care home staff more money. Now, how does that help the resident in the care home who hasn't left for God knows how long? So this is not about safety. This is not about saving anybody's lives. So if it's not about safety and saving anybody's lives, what is the validity of a closure order? However, you can't just ignore them. We do live in a country, as most countries are, with a legal framework. And you've got two choices. You either work within that legal framework, or you will suffer the consequences. As I mentioned quietly into the mic on Saturday, ignorance of the law is no excuse. I mentioned that to all my colleagues. But we've got the situation of, is the current law supportable by any evidence the way it was brought in? And the only way we're going to find that out is if somebody, at the first instance, when you get a work order or a closure order from AHS, you put it in appeal. That has not been tested at all yet. AHS may fight it, or the Public Health Appeals Board may actually push back. A lot of these pseudo-professional bodies for appeals are a bit of a kangaroo court, so you've got to know how to work with them. I've, similar to the Law Society, APIGA, the engineering group, or the College of Surgeons, they're run by people, it's a boys' club type situation. So you've got to be prepared and know how to follow their rules and use their rules to your advantage. But at this point in time, we haven't had anything tested. What we've had is a bunch of people, through no fault of their own, who've got tickets, ignored them, just like Adamson's barbecue out in Ontario. And when they ignore them, You get 2 strikes, and then AHS says, well, what is our option? Well, we go to a court. Now, when they go in front of a judge, the judge says, so what's happened? And they said, well, they've done nothing. They didn't challenge. They haven't questioned. They just ignored us. And the judge says, well, you're obviously just going to ignore everybody. So while we try and work this out, I'm going to shut you down. Because at the end of the day, you're not going to follow any rules. I'm just going to shut you down. Then what happens is, if you break the rules, you're in contempt of court. It's no longer about the health. It's a contempt of court. Now you're in big trouble. And judges don't like that. Basically, when they say something goes, they expect it to go. Doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. However, had you gone through the appeal process at the beginning, you could get a lawyer, say James or somebody from the JCCF, who can come up and say, listen, Your Honour, we got a single ticket, no notice, trying to run a business, running it safely, never had any issues with the business. And we've appealed this ticket, and we want the government to demonstrate before they shut us down and put us out of business and do irreparable harm, that they actually have a valid reason other than just because Dina Hinshaw wrote so on a piece of paper. That piece of paper that they're using to shut me down says right at the top of it that Dina Hinshaw has the evidence to demonstrate why this order is in effect. Well, that evidence has never been produced. So we'd like to just basically say, okay, it's never been challenged in court. It's never been challenged by the appeals board. And until that happens, we can't just unilaterally apply this law without some sort of challenge. Same goes with tickets. When police officers are issuing tickets, if they're never ever allowed to challenge them in court, how will the courts or the police officers ever know whether they are actually valid? If like with tickets, if every single one just keeps getting dropped as they are because the government doesn't want to have to produce evidence, or if these work orders never get challenged through the appeals process, how are we ever going to know? So, yeah, we're in this situation of, sadly, down at the whistle stop, and there's a couple of business owners up in Peace River in exactly the same boat this week. They hadn't followed the government approved process, hit the courts, and remember, the judges are all wearing masks out of their dirty robes, so they're a little bit on the government side already with a little bit of a bias, which they shouldn't be, but they are. I mean, people are human, even judges. But it's until somebody presents them with some evidence that they can work with, we're hooped. So moving forward, Chris is, sadly, he's in a tough position. I suspect what we're going to see out of him is a situation like we've seen in Adamson's barbecue, where Chris will get arrested. I mean, he's already sort of confirmed that that's his suspicion as to what's going to go on. I would be very surprised if that doesn't happen. They'll probably give a huge requirement on his bail, maybe as they did with Adam's barbecue, require that he's not allowed anywhere near the business, which obviously will impact his ability to stay open even after Monday, when technically, as long as nothing changes, watch this space on that. He might not even be able to open on Monday if he can't go anywhere near his business. I don't know what the conditions would be on the judge if they hit him hard tomorrow. But it's, from this point on, anybody who's out there who's looking into open business, don't look, and again, don't blame Chris for what he's done. He's fighting for Albertans, and he should be commended, and you should be out there supporting them every way you can. And the same with the people up in Peace River and anybody else, any other business who's trying to stand up and fight for their survival, then you should be out there helping them. Try where you can to do it in a way that is defendable. So, for example, with a business, and we've written that there is some instructions that are on a couple of websites right now, which tell you how to deal with a ticket, how you can actually legally deal with a ticket. And I hope some of them go to court. I suspect, like every other ticket that's out there, as long as you keep it in the Provincial Health Act, they're going to drop every one because they can't justify them. I hope eventually the police and the courts will realise that this is a shell game. Because if this is really that serious, why is Alberta Justice not prosecuting? Why, when they dragged Cody off from the grounds in Alberta last year, from the legislature grounds, did they not prosecute him? Why did they drop the ticket? If it is that deadly, it's almost a year on from then. How many people have died according to the government statistics? Why didn't they prosecute him? Because they haven't got any evidence. That's why. Well, the courts need to wake up to that. My colleagues in the RCMP, EPS, CPS need to wake up to the fact that, if you issue a speeding ticket, which is not that dangerous compared to COVID, they don't drop many of those tickets. In fact, as of October the 19th, you can't even go in on a photo radar ticket and negotiate a drop in the fine. Basically, they're not doing that anymore. You're going to court, and you either plead guilty or and pay the fine, or you plead not guilty and you go to court. Why, when these tickets are supposedly for the worst thing on the planet, that's killing grandma and everybody else, why are none of them ending up in court? Surely they should be at the front of the queue. Everything else should be put to one side, and we should have hearing after hearing to stop people breaking the law and putting everybody at risk. If they're not doing that, there's a reason they're not doing that. There's a reason they're not prosecuting these such easy tickets to prove. I mean, these are big tickets. They are so serious they can bankrupt you. $500,000 for a serious offence, 6 months in jail. I mean, you're talking about punishments that are beyond most criminal offences. And yet we're not prosecuting a single one. Why is that? Probably because they don't have the evidence. So with tickets, there's a way to deal with it. Make sure you keep it as a Provincial Health Act ticket. Same with the closure orders. Keep those orders focused on, don't give them an excuse to write something outside of the COVID restrictions. And sometimes it means you're going to have to back down a little bit. Like if they come into a premise, or you're in a premise and you're not wearing a mask and somebody tells you to leave, or you're out on a ski hill and somebody tells you to leave, it doesn't matter if you bought a ticket. It's a breach of contract that you can go after them for. You can make a complaint. Just leave. Then if you get a ticket, it's still a Provincial Health Act and you can fight it. If you've got a medical exemption, you can fight it and go, as I'm doing with Costco, through the human rights. There are ways to deal with this in the current legal framework. And while the current legal framework is in existence today, we have to work within it. Otherwise, we're no better than the government is. And the reality is, the law is a very powerful thing, as a lot of lawyers will know and as a lot of police officers will know. And these people that are making these rules need to understand that if they live by the sword, they will die by the sword. They can be taken to task for the very same laws that they're passing. And there are ways of dealing with that. There is no question that right now we have doctors, we have police officers, we have politicians that are committing criminal offences. The evidence is there. If we could just get a couple of prosecutors to actually stand up and grow a pair, then maybe we could put an end to this and actually have some prosecutions. Until that point that happens, I want to know, Jason Kenney, our Justice Minister, I can't remember his name because they keep changing every 5 minutes, whatever your name is.
Casey Maydew.
Yeah, there you go. Him. Don't know you, never spoke in front of you, but I have spoken in front of all the chiefs of police across Alberta and all the chief prosecutors across Alberta and the country. I've spoken in front of you twice by invite. Invite me again, or maybe I'll invite myself one of these days. But I'm speaking to all of you. Ask yourself why, after a whole year, if this is so serious and required an emergency change to the law with Bill 10 that had 2 changes to it, only 2 changes. It got rushed through, didn't follow proper parliamentary procedure, and it did 2 things. It changed the Provincial Health Act to allow, instead of $100 fine, which would be like a parking ticket, which people would just pay, it became anything between $1,000 and $500,000. That's how serious it was. That was one change. And the second change is it gave everybody like Dina Hinshaw and the education minister and everybody else the ability to create a law. That was all they did. I mean, hang on, aren't we trying to fight COVID? Aren't we trying to save lives? And the only things you did was give more power to ministers, bureaucrats, and and increase the fines and the stress on people. That didn't make any sense. But you've never actually used it. You just use it as a scare tactic to frighten people. But what you need to actually go to court, we need to see. In fact, Chief Justice Fraser, you need to demand one of these tickets is heard in court. And immediately, right now, you need to take, in fact, a bunch of them. You need to take those tickets. I mean, they're handed out like confetti up in Calgary. Pulaski, I mean, he's probably got a van full of them. Take him to court. Let him actually get full disclosure. Let him fight and prove that you have no evidence inside the current legal system. And as long as you stay inside there, as long as you do, I mean, don't do any of this nonsense of I'm not accepting the ticket, or I'm not giving you my name. Well, now you just crossed into a whole new territory that is, you're not fighting anymore. It's a bit like in England, you can actually be arrested for littering. You go, that's ridiculous. You drop a piece of paper on the floor. In fact, technically, if you spit on the floor, a police officer in the UK can arrest you under the general conditional powers arrest. Actually, they do it under PACE now. But what that is they're arresting you for not giving your name and address. And what did you actually achieve by not giving your name and address? Because you ain't leaving the police station until you do give it. So what did you actually achieve? What you achieved is a day in a cell, or as long as it takes for them to identify where you really are. It's not going to change the outcome of anything. All it's going to do is mean that they now have a charge that will stick and the ability to do more to you. And that escalates the situation. So you know what? If somebody's going to give you a ticket, just say, here's my name and address. Thank you for the ticket. Smile and say, I'll see you in court. To be honest with you, there is nothing that'll irritate a police officer more than that. You being pleasant to them when you get a ticket, smiling and saying, I'll see you in court. Yeah, that'll get on their nerves. Guaranteed.
Well, I think I just want to back up just a tiny bit, and I want to make it explicitly clear, and I think, David, you've done a wonderful job of it already. We are not giving Chris at the Whistle Stop any grief whatsoever. He is doing a fantastic thing for all Albertans. He has our 100% support. It's just, he was the groundbreaker in Alberta. David and I, we just heard about this appeal for public health orders just a couple of weeks ago, and David's been doing the research on it and trying to figure out how all that works. And we didn't even know about that when Chris first got his closure order, I think on around December 8th. So Chris has very much put himself under the blade of the guillotine here, and it's going to be a very complicated, short period of time. Hopefully it's a short period of time for Chris. But don't let that scare other businesses. I know this sounds frightening, but the cool thing about these appeals is that it buys you time. It should buy you time. We're not 100% on that, but in most cases, if you file an appeal with Alberta Health Services and Alberta Health Services says, no, we're going straight to court. We don't care if you got an appeal or not. The judge is going to look at them and say, well, this guy's appealing it with you. I'm not going to shut him down or issue any orders until you settle your appeal. So it should, hopefully, if you go through that appeals process, it should buy you more time. And by buying you more time, hopefully that gives other businesses time to open their businesses and create even more headaches for Alberta Health Services in the courts, because these appeals are going to take time for Alberta Health Services to settle. I mean, you read through it there. I think it says it's going to be to a panel of 5 or 6 people. It has to be done within 30 days. So Alberta Health Services it's going to take a lot of their resources just to handle one appeal, let alone 100 of them. So when you see Chris get arrested, don't panic. Yes, if you open your business illegally, that is a possibility. We're not saying that isn't a possibility, but these appeals will slow it down, and it gives you a leg to stand on when it finally does go to court.
The other thing is that the irony is that there's two things you can do to support Chris right now. One is get out there and go to his business. Now, be aware the RCMP in particular are disgraceful. I'm wearing this today. I said I wouldn't wear it out at the legislature grounds, and I'm not going to wear my cravat. I'm not going to wear my pin. But I'm wearing this just to wake some of them up. This idea now where you're going to ambush civilians to cut off the supply chain for businesses because you can't do anything if a business actually stays open, that's pitiful. That is disgraceful. That is a cowardly way of policing. And you do not deserve any respect. It's wrong. Again, give them a ticket. But ask yourself why all the tickets you've handed out up to now, not a single one of them's gone to court. And if you're continuing to hand them out, why are you doing that? I mean, are you trying to see, who can get through the most tickets in a week? It's insane. But so go down and even if it's just getting some takeout from him, if you don't want to, run the risk, you don't want to run the gauntlet, order some takeout from him. Support him, give him some support so he can continue his business. And if he gets arrested and he's not allowed to go there, he's got his great staff there who'll probably keep it. I'm assuming they'll keep it going for him, and he'll, have to work from home. But he's going to fight. He's got a legal team helping him out. But there's another thing that you can actually do to help him. He's now entered because sadly he missed the window for using their system against them. They can drag his process on now in the courts. They're in charge. They set the timelines. They set the courts. They drag things out. I mean, look at the lawsuit that the JCCF have filed. It's still waiting for its first appearance. Rocco Galati filed his paperwork, 10 months ago? He still hasn't had a hearing. Simon Dolan in the UK is coming up to a year, and he hasn't had even a first appearance. So once you get into the system, into the actual courts itself through this process, things will start to grind and you're on the back foot. But if somebody can get a win with Alberta Health through the appeals process, and then get in front of a court with that behind them and force some disclosure, you won't just be helping you and everybody else in your business, you'll also be helping Chris. Because if you can get a win there, his lawyers can go back into court and say, hey, you know what? Sorry, Your Honor, but you made a mistake. Look here. Yeah, Chris didn't follow the rules as far as they were laid out, but AHS has been or Alberta Health has been, a little bit sneaky, because when they were handing the ticket out, guarantee these inspectors aren't saying, here's your closure order or here's your work order. You do know if you go to this location, you can appeal it. I mean, when you get a ticket from a police officer, they will explain that you're allowed to plead not guilty on the back of the ticket. I'm pretty sure Chris wasn't told he could appeal the work order.
No kidding.
That is an abusive process. They have a duty to let him know what options he has, not automatically assume his guilt. And that can go in your favor in an appeal. If they're not telling you what you can and can't do, then that doesn't work for them. Chris has got that as a bit of a defense. Sadly, he's in that shoot right now. But if you want to help Chris out, you know what? When you open, make sure you do this process properly. Get that appeal in within 10 days. Don't wait. Get it in right away. Contact the JCCF. Contact Rebel News. Right now, they want to win on one of these things because it potentially is going to open the door for them to blow the lid off the lies that the government have been selling us for a long time. As Josh said this week, here we are. We currently have the lowest all-cause mortality in Alberta in the last 5 years for the last 12 months. The lowest. If you don't follow him, if you're on Facebook, follow Don Tenodi. He publishes some awesome stats. I used to do Alberta's. I don't bother anymore because he's right on top of them. He pulls all the government stuff. He produces some great charts. He makes it easy to read. He writes up exactly what you need to know. Look at those numbers. How in a situation where we're in the greatest pandemic on the planet, could we have less deaths? And not just a little bit less. This is the lowest in 5 years, all-cause mortality. They keep telling us all these people are dying, and Dina Hinshaw tells you 10 times as many people have died of flu, one of the biggest killers, every year. 10 times more than all the flu deaths in the last 10 years. Well, in that case, wouldn't we have seen our all-cause mortality increase this year significantly? If we take our biggest killer and make it 10 times bigger than all the last 5 years put together, shouldn't it be much higher? How the hell have we got it lower? Somebody's telling lies. Hospitals, they're overrun. No. They're emptying beds, particularly with elderly people. They're putting them in care homes. They're lying. And all of this is only going to come out if we go through the regular process. If you go through any other types of processes, if you think you're going to get around the legal system and get the answers that you're looking for, no, you're just going to get yourself into trouble. There is a legal process which Alberta Justice is very well aware of, called disclosure, capital D, disclosure. As one of the prosecutors used to say to me, whenever I said disclosure, there's a big D disclosure or little d disclosure. So capital D disclosure is basically the Crown is required to produce all information they have that may be relevant, not is relevant, may be relevant. The actual wording is not clearly irrelevant. Let that settle into your brain for a few minutes. But it's basically, they've got to prove it's not relevant information. So they've got to prove that death certificates are not relevant information, that the PCR tests and all the lab results are not relevant information. How many people are actually in hospitals, what all the comorbidities truly are, what they've done, what the results of testing of these so-called experimental vaccines are, what has been, how many people have died of suicide from the lockdowns. These are all relevant informations in relation to how they've reacted. Well, if it's relevant to your case, and you might say, but it's just a ticket. Just a ticket for not wearing a mask. But why are you wearing that mask? You are only wearing that mask because of all of those factors, everything they did, right back to the decision when Dina Hinshaw said she was shutting the province down on March 12th. Every single information. And it's not like they can say, well, we don't have to give that to you. It's there on the top of every single one of their orders. I have all the information that justifies I can do that. Okay, well then if you have all the information, show us the money. Don't have any choice.
So, David has outlined here, the best, what we think is probably the most logical way of handling this. We are seeing all sorts of alternative ideas kind of creep to the stage, and you're seeing these lines in all sorts of videos. Things like, when the police are dealing with somebody, that person will say, well, I choose not to contract with you. Can you choose not to contract with a police officer or the justice system? Like, can you just walk away and say, these laws don't apply to me? Like that, how does...
So what you're describing here is a system that has been around for 100 years. It's changed its name. It's been rebranded over and over again as the justice system gets wise to it. But no, I mean, you are not undertaking a contract with a police officer. A police officer is applying the law to you as a person. And even that, when we get into some of these groups they have so many names, and to the point like that, the things that they talk about and the things that they do have identified them in the security services as domestic terrorists. The reason for that is they have actually, when somebody says the laws don't apply to me, it's not just as simple as, well, I'm not going to take a speeding ticket. But why would it just end with a speeding ticket? Taxes wouldn't apply to me. Murder wouldn't apply to me. Criminal damage to property, terrorism. I mean, they're all laws. So if a basic ticket doesn't apply to you and a police officer has no authority over you, there is no end to what you can do. I mean, there are no laws other than, maybe something that you may follow in whatever religion you follow, the Bible or whatever. Thou shalt not. But the reality is we have laws for a civilized society. We don't agree with a lot of them. We certainly don't agree with the government and a lot of governments, but that doesn't mean you are above them. If you don't agree with the law, you've got a couple of choices. One is to challenge it in court. The other is to get yourself elected, get to the legislature and change it. That's the way society works right now. But there's a few groups, and typically they've been ignored by the police for the very reason that when you are a person who doesn't believe there are any laws that apply to you, you tend not to be able to get together as a group, because a group of anarchists are hard to actually all get together in one go, because somebody wants to be in charge. Well, nobody can be in charge if no rules apply to them. So they started off back sovereign citizens, freemen of the land. There's lots and lots and lots of names for them. And the RCMP actually get special training because they deal with rural areas where primarily these people live or have lived in the past, and they get special training on how to deal with them. But recently, what I've seen, and to be honest with you, I've seen so many groups, and they talk about these things, and they'll set up their own courts, they'll have their own sheriffs, they'll issue warrants, and in extreme circumstances, they've kidnapped people and they've even murdered people under the authority of their court, which is superior to what they believe, the Corporation of Canada. And the pitch that these people give, the training that they receive is, and the documents they rely on they're all very close to things that people would recognize. The closest thing I can think of it is, if anybody's ever been to a pitch for a timeshare, they'll sit there and they'll give you a pitch. And as they go through the pitch, they'll actually hit you with one item after another until eventually they get a hook. And they'll get a hook which will be something you'll recognize and connect with, and then they'll use that to reel you in. So again, a lot of these things have been building up over the years, and as I say, police don't tend to notice them because they've never created any real size or major threat other than individuals like up north blowing up pipelines. But recently, what we've seen is a brand new branding of the freemen of the land and the sovereign citizens. They're using terminology that most city police officers won't understand, and even the RCMP in a lot of cases, until they start hearing the pitch, won't actually recognize, because police officers and the justice system are trained, particularly here in Canada, outside of Quebec anyway, in common law. Common law is actually case law. It's where the judge effectively decides law. And that actually takes us back to what we were talking about earlier. We have no case law on the current orders that are out there. We need some case law. We need a judge to make a decision. So what they did is they've used this common law terminology. So people go, oh, well, that makes sense to me because we're in a common law system. So yeah, there's common law. And then they'll start moving into pictures. And if you recognize it and challenge them, they'll actually come back and say, oh, no, it's different. It's not like that. We're not like the sovereign citizens. We're not like Freeman. I mean, the pictures are actually quite brilliant. I mean, they're almost as good as the psychology the government's been playing on us with COVID. And they're capitalizing on the fear of what's happening. And people realize, like Chris has sort of experienced, and what do you do to fight this tyranny that the government and the fear that the government's coming up with? And somebody comes along and says, I have the answer. You just follow this little simple script and you give somebody a notice of liability, or you say, I don't contract with you, or anything else. And they sound like good things. And I mean, you'll get the city police will be completely baffled in most cases because they haven't had any training, and because they haven't seen, any large scale sovereign citizens for God knows how long. So they'll tend to walk away, and then they'll ambush you a bit later when nobody's around and they've got their senses together and say, hey, here's a rack of tickets, see you in court. That only works so far. If, however, you get a little bit uppity with them and you start saying, I've got here's my notice of liability. Even that, the term notice of liability is used as a deliberate thing they say, okay, well, you need this notice of liability because you need to know who's giving you the ticket. Why are they giving you the ticket? And you need to let them know that if this goes wrong, they're liable for anything they do. Well, all those facts are correct under the current legal system. You are allowed to know who it is who's giving you the ticket or who's accusing you. You are allowed to know what you're being accused of. And you are quite entitled, the person who gives it, if a police officer does something wrong and isn't acting lawfully, or the law isn't there to back up what they're doing, then they are liable for their actions. So that notice of liability sounds like it makes sense, sounds like it fits in. And then they back it up with all sorts of other comments. And so people are getting sucked into this right now. And as well as we've, more serious than people missing their deadlines for the existing legal system where they do have a chance to fight back. I'm seeing more and more people that are buying into, for no other reason than they're desperate. I mean, it's been a year. People are getting desperate. They are terrified of what's going to happen next. And any port in the storm, as they say, common law is that port in the storm. It makes sense if it's and it's like, well, what's the risk? Well, the risk is that you'll get into an escalated confrontation with a police officer. And then the next thing is you're being kicked to the floor or tasered. Or you get into a scuffle, or worst case scenario, you do actually get in front of a judge. And this is how important the courts consider this common law, sovereign citizen stuff. The irony of it all is that the current precedent case law in the world is here in Canada. It's not just here in Canada, it's here in Alberta. It's a case law called Meads versus Meads. And it was finally a court, a superior court said, okay, we'll take one of these cases on and we'll actually make some decisions. And they reviewed all the cases out there. We're talking about legal cases now, not the BS cases that the government has. So they looked at all the legislation, all the rulings, and said, what can we find that's common about this? And so they described it as pseudo law. They actually described it as gobbledygook and equated it to Lewis Carroll's The Jabberwocky in the structure of it. It's basically designed to throw as much stuff as possible at the courts to confuse them. The Supreme Court of Canada, the Supreme Court in the UK, and pretty much all of them around the world got this case and got the documentation from it. And as a result of that, they will not even hear a case on common law, as it is now called, branded, or pseudo law, or they created, like every government body wants to create their own acronym. So it's actually they created this acronym of Organized Pseudological Commercial Arguments, or OPCA. That is now the new terminology for everything, whether it be sovereign citizens, common law, or whatever. Common law is still pretty new, so it hasn't actually got into the documentation, but it is exactly the same thing. Common law people will try and tell you it's not, but when they start handing out to you notice of liabilities, I don't contract with you, I'm not, I am, my name, I am David, or I am the person known as David, and I'm different from me, and my birth certificate, and capital letters, and all of these things. If you do a search on them, look up sovereign citizens or freemen of the land, and you will recognize a lot of the pictures you've been told. And one of the things, so I don't know whether any of the common law people, I mean, there's an awful lot of groups out here right now that are actually banking, betting their world on common law as going to be the savior for them. Sorry, guys and girls, it's not going to save you. It is going to lead to civil war. If these groups get big enough, there is only one outcome, and that is the overthrow of the government and the replacement of the government with their new government, their new courts. Remember I said at the beginning of this, these groups create their own courts, their own sheriffs, their own police, their own warrants, their own laws, all the way up to discussions of replacement of the UN. And it's like, okay, how does that happen in the current system? It doesn't. The only way that happens is because the government that we have today and the structure we have today isn't just going to go, oh, you're right, we'll just step to one side and you set up the new system, and all the judges, you go home now, you're not judges anymore, and all the police officers in the armed forces, yet just put your guns down, you're not actually police officers and armed forces anymore. You have to apply for the job of the new common law judge. That's not going to happen. There is going to be a clash, and as I say, there's tons of stuff out there that it's well documented. You will recognize it, but these people need to understand that the police have been distracted up to now. The courts have been distracted, handing out tickets. They need to stop being distracted, and they need to start doing their job and actually looking in both directions. Because the common law system is not, I mean, unless civil war is what you're looking for to overthrow a government, if that is what your plan is, if that is what you think is going to save humanity, then yeah, common law is one of those things that'll do that. I, as a police officer, a retired police officer, cannot condone that for one reason and one reason alone, and it's got nothing to do with the law. It's got to do with the oath I swore to protect people. And I know for a fact that civil war will result in one thing and one thing alone: the deaths of an awful lot of innocent people. And I cannot stand by and watch that. I will not stand by and watch that. Now, all the common law groups that are out there, and any group that's out there, that, whether you be political, religious or whatever, if you've got something that you want to do and you want to change the world in some way, but it was something that existed before COVID, put it to one side. We have a crisis right now in the world, and it's called COVID. But it's not actually COVID, the disease. It's the government's response to it. If we all come together, if all of those groups, with all your money, your organization, your skills, your passion, comes together and focuses on that one thing just for 5 minutes and puts all this insanity aside and focuses on waking the police up, pushing back, and focuses on that one thing, then we will win. We will get our lives back. But if you continue to grow with these things that the police are aware of, the security services are aware of, and the courts are aware of, all that happens is that innocent people are going to lose their businesses. They're going to do the I don't contract with you. And then they're going to get the ticket, they're going to get into court, and that all of that stuff you told the police is going to be put in front of a judge, and the judge is instantly going to think of you as an imbecile. I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's what they're going to do. If you are lucky, they won't have you committed. That is the reality of what's happening. You have to go and look at the history of the things that you've been told. Go and find yourself a common law video. Go and find yourself a sovereign citizen video. Sit down and listen to what you've been told and break it down. Does it make any sense? One of the things I like to say to people is, if the current laws don't apply to you, when the common law people take over, why would those laws apply to you? I mean, it's what they call in the legal world reductio ad absurdum. Basically, this argument reduces to absurdity because there is never a never end to it. It's like if the common law people create a court and they decide they're going out to arrest Justin Trudeau, well, can't Justin Trudeau just say, I refuse to contract with you? And then you can't arrest him? I mean, isn't that how it works? Or is your law the important one? And you know, when you get somebody who actually believes they're above the rules, doesn't matter what they agree to, you give them the mic, you give them a seat at the table, and then they go, yeah, screw you. The rules don't apply to me. Are those the sort of people that you want to be around? And bear in mind that a lot of people that are actually talking about common law right now are doing it because they're desperate. They don't understand. They don't have the history. Police officers do have the history and the courts do have the history. The new branding of it has made it very difficult for people to see the fallacy that it is. There's a lot of things there are a lot of hooks in their pitches that make sense to you. You know, when they talk about, well, the name you were given, you know, the contract that was created on your birth certificate, you had nothing to that. You had no decision in that. And you're a different person to that. Well, that makes sense. I mean, we live in a world where, you know, people can pick their own genders, they can change their names. So that makes sense that, you know, I didn't have any say in that at the beginning. And this is what these processes do. This is what these arguments are, is they're designed to actually find a hook that you can hang on to. You know, even when you talk about that, the separation of the blood and bones person from the name person, that ties into a lot of spiritual people and religious people, you know, almost like the separation of the soul from the body. So it's very easy to buy in, particularly when you are so stressed and so beaten and think there's nowhere to go. But the reality is there is a way out of this. There is a way we can fight back. We just have to find the right people to fight with us. The police need to fight with us. The police need to actually do their job. The justice system needs to do its job. Chief Justice Fraser, you need to do your job. I won't shout because I haven't got my little foamy thing on here, and I'll make the mic go funny. But just one last thing on these groups, common law. To be fair to them, they do say that they've won cases, that they've won. And we see the videos all the time of the police officer walking away. You very rarely see a video of an RCMP officer walking away or somebody who's in the rural area. They're usually city cops because or it's AHS that walks away because they're confused. They don't know what to do. And most people, you know, will be confused. But they keep telling me that they've won all these cases. And bear in mind, sovereign citizens have been at this for over 100 years. They still haven't took over the world. I still haven't seen a single case that they've won where they've used these arguments and actually won in court So if you're out there and I'm starting to wonder whether there are any groups left that aren't sovereign citizens underneath the skin, because they go very, very high up, controlled by very, very deep pockets and very powerful people, almost like what's happening on the government right now. But if you've got some cases, I'm not closed to having. I mean, I'm having discussions on a daily basis with sovereign citizens, with common law people, and trying to work through them with them how to actually get us out of this mess. And there are some of them that, despite all their beliefs in the system, they're still working with me to actually fix this problem in a way that actually may actually get them moving forward. And I say to them, if you've got a win, if you've got something you can show me, Can Lee actually has all the court cases. If you've got, I mean, it's a bit like if we had somebody at our rally that got COVID and died, it'd be front page news everywhere. Well, if somebody had actually worked out a way where you could effectively never pay a ticket again, never pay a tax again, and all you had to do was say, I don't contract, or pay somebody $100 for an alloidial title, you'll need to look that one up. It's been a while since one of them hit the courts, but it's a common term now that you'll hear a lot. Oh, I can get a title for my land, I can register my land, and then I don't have to pay taxes. Well, ask yourself one quick question. When was the last time the city came and emptied your septic tank or fixed your plumbing for you? You do not pay taxes for the property you live on. You pay taxes for all the property that you use when you leave your property. Your property is just used as a basis to calculate how much money you contribute to the people who fix the roads, who keep the lights going, who clear the snow. That's where your taxes go. So you can have, I mean, in the UK, you can't own the land at all. The Queen owns everything. In Canada, the majority of the land, the best you can get, is basically a surface title, and the mineral rights belong to the government or somebody else, unless you're running a mine or you're a native. The native band lands tend to have the mineral rights associated with them. But in Canada, there's no such thing as an alluvial title. In the UK, there's no such thing as that. I mean, it does exist as a concept, but there's no way you can get it. And the other thing is like the common thing with common law and sovereign citizen arguments is they say, the current system has no authority over me, doesn't exist, is totally irrelevant. And then they'll file their documents in court and get them all notarized and register them with registries, or they'll go to, I need It's like, but if these organizations don't apply to you, why would you even be dealing with them? I mean, if you can actually say, you can't give me a ticket, you have no authority over me, then why are you even going to court? But they still go to court and they give their arguments, they get found guilty, and in some cases they lose everything. And if you're a business right now who's already struggling, you want to give yourself the biggest fighting chance at surviving, and telling AHS or the RCMP or CPS or EPS, I refuse to contract with you, demanding that they sign a notice of liability and shoving it in the face, is at best going to result in you being found guilty at court. At worst, is going to end up with somebody getting seriously hurt or worse. Because take it from me, as a police officer with enough years service, and after an injury on duty, not being able to be a police officer anymore, but working with the security services and the police over here for decades, things can escalate really, really fast. You can think you're calm, you can think you're smart, but if you put yourself in a situation where things start escalating, the guy with the gun's going to win every single time.
Well, that was, you laid that out really well, I'd say. Yeah, these arguments are becoming more and more commonplace all the time. I mean, we had a lot of people pushing them at our protests earlier this year and over the summer, and eventually we had to kind of put our foot down and just say, you know what, we're sticking to COVID. A lot of people claim to have the solutions. David and I aren't really claiming to have a solution. We're claiming we have a strategy. I wish we could come up here and make you ironclad promises that if you follow the steps we've laid out here today, it's going to be a slam dunk victory. There are no guarantees in life. That's just the way it is. And so anybody promising you that they have the solution is probably full of... but I mean, there's so many buzzwords, right? You could, if anybody mentions the straw man, you're talking to a common law sovereign citizen freeman on the land type. So the straw man is, they believe that your person is different from you, the human. Your person is a legal fiction that was created on your birth certificate when you were sold into slavery. And they even go so far as to say, you see this little number on the back of your birth certificate? Well, that actually links to a bank account where if you file our magical paperwork and put the right stamps on it and stamp it in blood, I'm serious, some of these people actually think you can stamp things with blood. Not even kidding.
That's just likely to get you COVID.
And really creep out the clerk, man. And there's always, that's the best lies always have a good chunk of the truth in them. Because in a way, you are the collateral on government debt in a large sense of the picture. Right? When you go to borrow money for a mortgage on a house, they look at how much money you're making. They look at your age. How long are you going to be able to keep making that money? And so the government does the same thing. When the government is shopping around for someone to buy their bonds, it's like, okay, well, we got millions of young people coming up here. There's not too many old people. We should be able to pay our bills. And so in that sense, you are the collateral on the government debt. And in another sense, so there's always that element of truth into what they're saying, and it can be really enticing, really appealing. In the Bible, they call it itching ears. It's just stuff you want to hear, you want to believe it. And then they go into the Corporation of Canada, and it's there's an infinite number of these groups. And it's
that the Corporation of Canada and the Corporation of Alberta. These are terms that anybody who's worked in government would sound familiar and would make sense, because when the government needs to set up an arm's length body to do some work for them, like the police were at some point trying to set up an organization that would run the IT for the police across Alberta, including the RCMP. And one of the discussions is what's called a Part 9 corporation or a Crown corporation. So it sounds like it's a private body. But what it really is just another arm of the government, wholly owned by the government, that is a regulated body that has to do as the government says. Similar to AGLC, it's not really a private company, but it's sort of a private company. So when somebody says, the Corporation of Canada, and I didn't, you have to have a contract with a corporation for them to have any authority. Those terms seem to make sense. And, they, like if you listen to, again, there's so much of what they say that is that hook that will grab you every single time. Like one of the most common ones is this: they'll tell you, you have to say something to a police officer. And this is actually a big beef I've got with when they changed the caution many years ago in the UK, actually in 1995 when I left. And the old caution used to say, you don't have to do anything you don't have to say anything unless you wish to do so, but anything you say may be taken down and used as evidence against you. Basically, it was a caution to, you should probably shut up. Make sure you speak to a lawyer before you say something that gets you into trouble. Because at the end of the day, you're not always going to be thinking right, and you could say something that gets you into more trouble. They changed the caution to say, but anything, if you don't say something, then that could be used against you. Well, the common law sovereign citizens have actually used that concept to say, oh no, you have to. You have to tell them. You have to, because there's this concept of, you know, if you don't say something and it's an admission of guilt. That is not a legal concept in your interaction with the police. You have no obligation to say anything. You can say, thank you for the ticket. You do have an obligation to give them your name and address. That'll get you arrested if you don't do that. But you've got no obligation to say anything after they give you the ticket. The only time you have an obligation to say something in a court process is when the judge asks you, do you plead guilty or not guilty? If you don't say something then the judge has to make a decision. Either you are incompetent to stand trial and he'll throw you in a padded cell, or you are competent to stand trial and you're in contempt of court, in which case they'll find you guilty. So when you get to court, yes, you must plea, but you don't have to do that when you're talking to the police officer. And the reality is, particularly when tensions are high, and I've never seen a world where tensions aren't more high in every interaction now. The last thing you want to get into is a war of words where neither one of the parties, even the most gifted person with decades of experience in the sovereign law, sovereign citizen pitch, and an RCMP officer with 30 years training in dealing with these people will still trip up in the current environment, will still escalate the situation. Even though they know every single trick in the book, they'll still, particularly with this new branding of common law, because it does trip people up. And also remember that RCMP officer, the Calgary officer, the EPS officer that you're standing there arguing with, probably been wearing a mask for the last 8 to 10 hours. CO2 levels are a little bit peaky there, as we said in our broadcast a couple of weeks back. The amygdala's firing away on all engines, and the likelihood of it escalating is higher now than it's ever been. The likelihood of you having a calm interaction with a police officer is the lowest it's ever been. So don't be the one that escalates it, because there's no reason for it. Would you put your life at risk for a speeding ticket?
Yeah,
Well,
no
guess
kidding.
what? You are more likely to be convicted of a speeding ticket than you are of one of these health tickets. And although I can't guarantee you will win any of this, because at the end of the day, the government's in charge, the courts are in charge, what I can do is tell you that I've got over 30 years experience in this process called disclosure. I actually was the chair of the technical working group that defined all the aspects around disclosure. There is a requirement for Alberta Justice to retain all of their records here in Alberta. They can't ship them across the border. I was the one who put that in place. The actual disclosure forms called the prosecution package, I designed that. What the RCMP use, what EPS uses through their gateway system, I was instrumental in designing that while I worked on the system. I know this system better than most people, certainly the people that are using it. I was the leading digital evidence expert that Alberta Justice called for a number of cases with DUIs. I know how the system works, and it can work against them. And that's why you are not getting these tickets prosecuted. That's why if you follow the current system, you can expose the lies. And you can help Chris. I mean, don't go out there looking for a ticket. Don't go begging for a ticket. But if you get a ticket, take that ticket, plead not guilty. If you can find a lawyer that wants to do it, demand your constitutional right to a speedy trial and demand full disclosure. I'm hoping that at some point the judiciary, and they should already have done it by now, after a year, they should be asking the government and Alberta Justice, Why do I not have one of these cases in front of me? If this is so dangerous, if this is something, because it's obviously not stopping people until we set an example with one of these tickets and push it through the courts, they're obviously not stopping people breaking the law. So you need to prove your case. So you know what? Edmonton Police, Calgary Police, all the police forces, not just here in Canada, across the world, put up or shut up. Either force these cases to go to court and give us full disclosure, or stop writing tickets and leave us alone. And if you want to actually put your efforts into investigating something, go and have a look at Dina Hinshaw, Shandro. Go and have a look again. Go into the care homes. Find out what's really going on. Do your goddamn job and leave the people alone, because nobody has died in the last year that wouldn't have normally died. And in a pandemic that shut the planet down, if you're not asking a question why, then that mask is too tight. Or maybe you've got 3 or 4 layers. You know what? Take the mask off. Take a big, deep gulp of fresh air and live your life. And ask some questions. Nothing's hidden. Everything's in plain sight. Just like, ironically, the freemen of the land and the sovereign citizens. What's amazing to me is we live in the greatest information age, where there isn't anything, like nobody even needs a brain anymore. There isn't any piece of information you can't get access to. And yet nobody's looking at anything. We are buffoons as a human race. All we do is get spoon-fed garbage from the media every day. And we rabbit the same garbage every day. And that goes for the AHS officers. That goes for every single police officer out there. If you can't quote me the chapter and verse of the law, don't tell me it's because of just keep repeating the same section of the Provincial Health Act. Tell me what the order is. Tell me what the actual offence is. Tell me what the basis of that offence is. And if you can't, then you are ignorant of the law. I can tell you. From Order 14, 2020, right the way up to 44, 2020. 42, 2020 is the predominant one right now. 33, 2020 for schools. 29, 2020, and 32, 2020 for care homes. I'm not a police officer. So if you can't do that as a police officer, what section of what law gives me an exemption to not wear a mask? If you don't know what that is, then you have no goddamn right writing a ticket. Same with you, AHS. If you don't know exactly what the order is that requires and what the reasoning behind that is, because at the end of the day, when you're issuing a closure order or a work order because somebody's got rats running around and there's rat poo everywhere and cockroaches, you pretty much know why you're writing that ticket. But just saying because of COVID, yeah, come over here, you need a slap upside the head.
I probably shouldn't do it, but I think a lot of the common law people are kind of like, I think they're drawn to a lot of the things that I say. Like in my Saturday speech here, I talked about we are governed by consent. You've talked in your speeches about how we are policed by consent. And what the common law sovereign citizen movement does is that takes it and it distills it. They try to focus that on the individual. And that's not the way it works. When I say that we are governed by consent, I mean the totality of the citizenry. We're not talking one guy who doesn't want a ticket. We're talking about 10,000 people that are going to take that ticket and say, yeah, stick it to me. I don't care. I'm done with this. I'll see you in court. That's when we're going to make the difference. One guy saying this ticket doesn't apply to me, number one, you've blown the opportunity to make that case in court before a judge, because now you're just going to get laughed at and thrown out of court, and you're going to be in more trouble than you were when you went in. But we need people in mass to stand up against. No, and so when we're governed by consent, if the people lose faith in the government and the system in general, it falls apart. I mean, Jason Kenney, without the support of the people, is nothing. He's a nobody. That building, it's just a building. That's all it is. But as long as we believe in that system, it has its authority. So, like you would need an awful lot of sovereign citizens or common law people to change that. But I don't think, I don't think it has to go that far, though. Like you said, if that's the way that it's going to go, it's going to be civil war. It doesn't have to go that far, though. I mean, we just need, a few of Jason Kenney's UCP MLAs to say, this is BS. We're done with this. I bet if we had 3 UCP MLAs that came out and said, Jason Kenney, you're a fraud. This whole thing's a fraud. We're done with this. That might be enough right there for Jason Kenney to put his tail between his legs and turn around and run away from the whole thing. Well,
so outside of that, let's just going back to the common law. Like we've sort of beaten up on the concept, and let me be clear: we're beating up on the concept, not on the people. As I say, I talk to common law people, and whatever they want to call themselves, on a regular basis. We do on Saturdays. If they get into those conversations, I don't. You know what? I'll give you 5 minutes. If you're not going to listen, if you're indoctrinated, there are bigger things to do. But if you could just put that to one side for 1 minute, we have at our protests in Edmonton, we have every single flavor of humanity is there, with every single flavor of personal view of the world, whether it be common law, transgender, Islamic, Scousers like me, baldy. We've even got some baldy people. There's literally, we've got every single, and a lot of these people come up and speak. And one of the things we've done is we've made sure that everybody who's there understands why they're there. Everybody who speaks understands why they're speaking. That's why we don't have printed signs. We're not an advertising company for some corporate entity that is, has some agenda they've been running forever. But with every single one of you people that have one of these other viewpoints of, well, maybe common law might work. You know what? If enough people, if you had the equivalent of a referendum and you decided that you were going to have 50%, 51% of the population said, yep, we believe in this common law thing. We are going to vote the current government out and change the world. Fine. That's something that can happen. Until that happens, all you are is a threat to the people who don't understand it. And there are too many people that's the case. And at the moment, this is not the time for that fight. If we can't stop COVID restrictions, you are never going to. I mean, bear in mind, sovereign citizens have been trying to take over the world for 100 years, and I still haven't seen them win a case, let alone, I mean, they haven't even won a speeding ticket, let alone change the world. So, and again, I'm putting it out there, as I've done every time I have this conversation. People keep telling me, and then when I say, well, can you just show me the links? Can you just show? Oh, no, just phone someone, or just do this, or just do that. No, I don't have time for that. Either give me that piece of information, because if you don't have it, I've just got to assume it doesn't exist. But if you've got it, show it to me. Because you know what? If there is another way out of this that I don't know about, if you are winning cases, and God forbid, if it is as simple as just saying, I don't contract, then woohoo, I am behind it 100%. But the reality is, I know it isn't. But if we could take every single one of those squabbling groups who all want to be in charge and all believe they're above their own rules, if you could all come together for 5 minutes and focus on one thing, the survival of businesses, the survival of the elderly, and the survival of the human race, and put an end to this COVID, it would be done. If every business just said, I'm done, I'm opening up, that's the end of it. If police officers said, you know what, I'm not giving any more tickets out, I'm done, this is a waste of time. If Chief Justice Fraser turned around and says, hang on a minute, none of this makes sense, show me the evidence that backs up what you've done, because as the last line of government, as the last line of defense that is the check and balance for government overreach, I want you to show me the money on where all this evidence is. I'm not listening to your speeches anymore. I want to see, as I would in a court of law, you better prove to me beyond a reasonable doubt. I will not lock up one person as a judge, is what a judge will tell you, unless I can prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt. We just locked up the planet with evidence that doesn't even meet the balance of probability. And why are the judges not asking what's going on? Why are police officers not asking what's going on? Why are you not looking at it? You know, at the end of the day, Josh, you've been looking at this for how long? I've been looking at this for 14 months now. December 2019, I started to freak out about what I was seeing in the world. I look at it every single day. But, you know, one of the people, there was a young girl out in Ontario that when I started this, she was ahead of the curve. No special skills, just a phone and an internet connection, and could see everything. You know, Josh, have you got any, decades of experience as a forensic investigator or cybersecurity expert to search out, or maybe a virologist to be able to find out what's going on? I don't think anybody else in our audience, are you all highly qualified people? You know what's going on. You can see the numbers. You can read the reports. You can understand. You can see the research. Well, if you can all do it, there's no excuse for a single police officer not to have done the same. Stop being afraid and start doing your job.
Amen. Sorry, my dog came up for scratches. That's why I looked distracted. And on that note, show up on Saturday. It's going to be a great protest. They always are. We got Karen's been getting tremendous interest in speakers this week, reviewing speeches like crazy. So we're out there every Saturday, 1 p.m. We start off with some music. I really hope Leo is going to be back this week. Might be too cold for him. We'll see. The speeches start at 1:30, and at 2:30 we go for a march. If you just want to recharge your batteries, hang out in a little slice of the old normal for a couple hours, it is a great place to be. I always go home feeling better. Hanging around in this new normal really as a way of dragging you down throughout the week. And these Saturday protests are practically a spiritual experience. So if you haven't been to one yet, bring some friends. Come on down. It's going to be bloody cold this weekend from what the forecast is saying. So wear everything. If you have snow pants, put them on. If you have winter boots, absolutely. You're going to be standing on concrete. You need warm winter boots. Snow pants, you have to be completely windproof. If you follow that advice, you will have a good day. There's going to be hot chocolate, so bring a some kind of coffee mug, travel mug, and pour yourself a hot chocolate. And that's courtesy of the folks over at Alberta Action. And let's do it up. It's a great afternoon. I think you'll like it. I'm sure most of the people watching this episode probably been there already. Or maybe you've been going to the ones in Calgary or Red Deer. Those folks in Red Deer could sure use some support. And those folks in Calgary, boy, they were getting some amazing numbers, and it's really fallen off. So find a protest near you and go do it. And that was awesome, David.
And two things. Because it's going to be cold on Wednesday, the homeless person with the pumpkin on his head will probably be back. And he's always available if you want to hug an ex-cop. I hated hugging. I was anti-hug. I thought hugging should be abolished up until COVID-19. And now I hug everyone. Don't take it personally. Just what I do.
Yeah.
But don't. But as Father John would say, don't hug a cop on duty.
Well, my personal favorite is Helga. I think Helga gives the best hugs at the protests. Although I have heard rave reviews about Kyle's hugs. Kyle hands out a lot of hugs. I've heard they're good. I don't think I've gotten one yet.
I hear that's a call for Kyle. You're going to get a big hug from Kyle this week.
Awesome, David. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. As always, thanks so much for you and Karen are, man, we wouldn't be here on this podcast or out on Saturday if it weren't for your support. And so thank you guys for everything you do.
Well, we wouldn't be anywhere if it wasn't for what you were doing right at the beginning and what you've continued to do every single day since. Everybody called you the Angry Albertan, but you're a bit of a pussycat, really. Although, and your voice seems to have definitely survived better this week than mine did. People say to me, if I've got so much lung damage, how can I actually shout and talk as much as I do?
Sheer will.
Sunday I suffered.
Oh yeah,
and my throat is still sore and still struggling. But I will be there on Saturday. I may not speak Saturday because there's a lot of people that need to speak. But I'll always be there if anybody's got any questions. Even the sovereign citizens, the common law people. As I say, if you want to chat, if you want to come, if you want to help, I'll talk to you. If you've got questions and if you've got anything that can change my mind, then I am open to anything. But I've been researching this for a very long time. It's part of my training as a police officer. It's part of a lot of police officers' training. Do your research, ask questions. And at the end of the day, just let's get through COVID. Leave the agendas to one side. Leave the printed market material, the unify the people, the line, and all those other things. You know what? The signs we get every week now that people put their heart and soul into them. It's just that's where I recharge my batteries every week. All those people that are there, the kids that come, I just want to play hockey. I want to see my friends, and they've got these little signs. But what they do is they get to play with some friends. They get to slide down the hill in the snow, get some hot chocolate, even if you're scared, even if you don't know what's going on, even if you're confused, just come down and stand off in the distance. Nobody's going to come and bite you. Nobody's going to come and chase you off. Nobody's going to come and scream at you. If you feel comfortable, you want to talk to somebody, we'll respect, if you say stay back for 6 feet and nobody's there to try and frighten anyone. Nobody's there to bully anyone. We're just there to educate, recharge our batteries, and hopefully, for me, it's about getting my colleagues to wake up and realize that they are on the wrong side of history right now. It is time to be on the right side of history.
Absolutely. And if you're in a position where your appearance at a protest could affect your employment or your career, please wear a disguise. Not only do I film everything we do is broadcast. You're showing up in public at a public protest. So I will definitely be filming you. But there are counter protesters that show up with cameras and stuff. So if you want to support the protest, but you cannot be recognized at work, then get your big hat, get your sunglasses on, maybe put on a mask or a balaclava or a pumpkin on your head, as David did. Yep. And we're not going to harass you. There have been some instances where people in the crowd have taken it upon themselves to confront somebody in a mask. We encourage everybody to not do that. And if you see anybody giving anybody in a mask a hard time, please kindly ask them to stop. And we have some counter protesters that show up regularly. One of them being Rickshaw Dave. Please ignore them. Don't say a word to them. Don't get in their faces. Don't do anything to them. I may not set the best example there, but just we're all better off if you just leave those people alone.
But bear in mind that these professional protesters, at the end of the day, the bizarre thing is, Why Antifa is not out fighting for their rights is bizarre. Why Black Lives Matter isn't out fighting for their survival. I mean, at the end of the day, this
We'd
is
stand with
not
them.
about, yeah, if you want to put your agenda and just want to come and fight for your survival, we'll all stand with you, whether you wear a mask or don't wear a mask. But if you've got an agenda, stay away. But bear in mind, the professional protesters are there to bait you into a confrontation. They want you to come up and harass them. They are not screaming and shouting at you because they're frightened of you. They want you to engage with them. The most frustrating thing you can do for them is ignore them.
Absolutely.
Stay away from them. And Rickshaw Dave, I know you said on the march, I'm not Rickshaw Dave, you've confused me. You should probably not, when you're telling the police what your actual name is, say it loud enough that you can be picked up on the audio on the camera. David Williams. I mean, seriously, you know what? You're not that bright. And do us a favor. You know what? You might want to bait people into it, but people have got enough on their plate as it is right now. Why you, as a human being, want to actually cause trouble and put people, children, women, and disabled people at risk? You are a disgrace of a human being. Stay away. If you don't agree with what we're doing, stay away. At the end of the day, there's not that many of us there. We're just trying to I mean, nobody's harming you. Just stay away. You're only coming there to cause trouble. And hopefully the sheriff pays attention this time and tells you to bugger off. Same with Megaphone Guy. You know what? If you want to come and stand with us, you're welcome. Any common law, any sovereign citizens, but you leave that crap at home.
Yeah.
If you want to be there and be there to end the lockdowns, yes, Kenny, I used the L word. And if you're still insane enough to think that we're not in a lockdown, somebody needs to lock you up for our safety. And your little speech today about care homes, about how much you're doing for care homes, when actually you then just went in and told us how much you're bribing care home workers to keep the residents under lockdown, you're a disgrace. You are and there is blood on your hands, and the evidence is there, and the time is coming that you will be held to account. All of you.
Well, you kept mentioning rats tonight, and Alberta is actually rat-free, except for the Alberta Legislature building.
No. The Alberta Legislature building is empty of rats. They're all in
the federal building. All right. And on that happy note, we're going to sign off. Thank you all for tuning in. It's been a slice, and we will see you on Saturday. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, everyone.